we've got to talk about this big news around white South Africans being accepted into the United States as refugees. Because while Trump has halted virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and war in places like Sudan and the Congo, on Monday we saw him welcome 59 members of a white ethnic minority group from South Africa known as Afrikaners. And they're the descendants of Dutch and other Europeans who went to South Africa centuries ago. They played a role in setting up the apartheid system in 1948, and now today, they and other white South Africans make up around 7% of the country's population while owning more than half of the country's commercial farmland, especially as much of that land was originally acquired by forcing out black farmers and herders. And in 1913, in fact, a law was actually passed explicitly allocating 93% of the country's land to white people. And now this week's news, it actually goes back to the current South African government's efforts to address this inequality through land reform. Because in January there, the president signed a controversial law that, in very rare circumstances, gives the government the ability to take private property without paying compensation, which then prompted Donald Trump to cut off all aid to South Africa and sign an executive order ordering his own administration to, quote, prioritize humanitarian relief, including admission and resettlement through the United States Refugee Admissions Program for Afrikaners in South Africa who are victims of unjust racial discrimination. And this is, you had others pointing out that several of the most influential figures around Trump are 50-something white men with formative experiences in apartheid South Africa. With that appearing to include not only Elon Musk, but also people like Peter Thiel, who's another Silicon Valley billionaire with deep ties to the administration. And actually, Musk has been one of the most prominent voices spreading claims about persecution and even genocide against white people and white farmers in particular in South Africa. And with that, on Monday, to justify the refugee program, we saw Trump repeating those claims.
But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about.
Now, notably, with that, you have many experts saying there's little to no evidence to back up those claims. As far as confiscating land, there is a law that would allow for that to happen, and whether that's a good idea, that's up for debate, obviously. And then, as far as the other claims, the idea of a white genocide taking place, you have experts saying that there's really no basis for that whatsoever, and then even the idea that white farmers are being specifically targeted and killed on a widespread or regular basis. You have many saying, for sure, there have been murders that have made for shocking headlines, but the reality on the ground there is that it's an extremely dangerous country in general, and black South Africans are ultimately far more likely to be victims of violence. And with that, while there are obviously concerns about violence, we really haven't seen people trying to say that they were refugees. And last year, there were reportedly no South Africans of any race, ethnicity, or linguistic group who met the UN's criteria to be resettled as refugees. And now, State Department officials are reportedly being tight-lipped about exactly what boxes have been ticked off for these new arrivals. Though a departmental memo obtained by the Washington Post reportedly claimed that most of them have witnessed or experienced extreme violence with a racial nexus, including home invasions, murders, or carjackings that took place up to 25 years ago. And then on top of all this is as the South African refugees have been given preferential treatment in a number of ways. Because for one, the refugee process often takes years, but Trump created an expedited pathway that's gotten them into the country in just a matter of months, with him also saying that he'd put them on an easy path to citizenship.
But follow to stay in the loop.